Hello, this is Socialist Links. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the Saigon Commune. As the title essentially presumes, this entire story about the Saigon Commune is commonly forgotten about. In fact, it's not really talked about at all in a lot of cases. In fact, there's been even quite a lot of stories, and even still today, quite a lot of defense to Ho Chi Minh, despite Ho Chi Minh's very direct involvement of almost betrayal into the Saigon Commune that is usually talked about within it. Hell, I even ended up actually having a antagonistic discussion with even comrades a part of the Revolutionary Socialist Network talking about Ho Chi Minh and the various problems I have with Ho Chi Minh and the things that he did before the Vietnam War took place. The Saigon Commune is possibly one of the most undertold stories of history that is hidden away due to the crisis playing a clear role in saying that getting rid of imperialism with the negotiation with the imperialists doesn't get rid of the oppression of imperialism. To fight against imperialism and its consequences to be conquered, the conquered have to fight against the conquerors and subject the conquerors to their authority of the conquered, so the conquered can act on their own interests. Without doing this and agreeing a treaty with their conquerors that would benefit them, and that would leave the state out of the control of democratic actions from the people themselves, the social relations that was there with the imperialists will still be there, but now with different people with the same social relations of the means of production and the actions of the mode of production to subject the population. This is the kind of role that Ho Chi Minh did indeed play with the Saigon Commune, and I will go in more detail talking about it. But that is basically the premise of this entire discussion. My problems with Ho Chi Minh here is the fact that he did indeed crush what I would say one of the first worker states in Eastern Asia in order to basically have a treaty with imperialists when the working class was very much clear and did indeed have the capabilities of fighting against imperialists through revolution. Regardless, though, Ho Chi Minh did indeed sign the treaty, though. Don't get me wrong, I am for getting out of a war and fighting as much as possible. I even think the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was needed, after the no war, no peace plan had failed during the Russian Revolution. If it means getting out of an imperialist war that doesn't benefit you at all, that is just a way for powers to gain more capital and more industry so that you can get more profit, then cut ties then yes, we might have to cut ties from that war as much as possible, even making retreats. It's better than going through a war that is for the rich, fought by the poor. But with Vietnam, it was different. In Vietnam, a lot of peace negotiations came down to where Ho Chi Minh ignored and expelled the Trotskyist faction of the Communist Party of Vietnam. Then once this happened, Ho Chi Minh and the rest of his supporters, that was very minor compared to the full membership of the Communist Party and the entire interest of the proletariat and peasant classes in Vietnam, started to promise the French Imperial Army that they would not get involved with the help of the workers' state that was forming against the French occupiers and the nationalists of Vietnam by the name of the Saigon Commune. In fact, the Trotskyists of the Communist Party, such as Dai Tu Thao and Nguyen An Ninh, had even been expelled from the Communist Party due to the disputes and debates on the Saigon Commune. Rather, we should get activity involved with the revolution, within the revolution of the proletarian Saigon, or rather, we should just end the conflict and get out of the war as much as possible, regardless of the actual radical change or the power of the workers. But how a party can benefit. This is what disconnected Tai Thu Thao from the Communist Party of Vietnam, and Ho Chi Minh was very more worried about his own hold of power rather than actually being a committed revolutionary. And this is one of the biggest mistakes of Ho Chi Minh that Tai Thu Thao and Nguyen An Ninh and the rest of the Trotskyists, a part of Vietnam, essentially were able to get out of, and were able to be in the interest of the working class, and were able to see the working class interest. But first, when we basically understand the disputes that the Trotskyists and the Stalinists had within the Communist Party, within the Indochinese Communist Party, we first have to understand the Saigon Commune and where did the Saigon Commune originate. In August of 1945, workers in Saigon were fed up of the previous Japanese occupiers and the new French occupiers that were essentially occupying them and were massively taxing them and were massively putting them back to low wages and into harsh conditions that essentially they had faced under the French and same kind of oppression that they faced under the Japanese, and were tired of essentially being wage workers. Ended up rebelling against the French and kicked out even the French armies through their own means of rebelling and declared a commune in Saigon. This is known as the August Revolution of 1945, and this is the basis and the very origins of what would commonly be referred to by many Marxists as the Saigon Commune. Regardless, Ho Chi Minh was responsible for the crushing of the Saigon Commune when the proletariat of Saigon rebelled against the French army and smashed the state machine and proclaimed a workers' state that is for an international revolution of the working class to rebel against the employing class. They proceed to abolish the standing army and the police force and replace their armed wing with a proletarian militia. A proletarian militia, that being the population that would directly join a part of the armed wing of society, where there is a direct contact from the people to the militia to ensure that the militia takes up on to their duties without acting on decisions over the population, but rather acting within the population, as well as there be a change in the judicial system where there was democratic trials. As in, that when there is a law broken and when the lawbreaker is caught and apprehended, the entire commune would gather up and vote on the actions of what should be done, once hearing the case, of course, and being informed as much as possible. There, the people themselves would have control on what should be done about crime, the lawbreaking, so that way there can be a full root stop against crime that is collectively decided by the people themselves, rather than being decided by a set bureaucratic law code that is made to destroy the organizing of the workers and protect private property and the accumulation of capital. Instead, the people protect themselves in a collective effort. After the abolition of the city government that was aligned to the Third French Republic, there was an entire new state machine, one that would be based on direct democracy, workers' rule, and collective organ of the state. That was done through the Soviet rule of the Saigon Commune, as in councils made up of workers, that workers would join and meet up with others, then propose policies and action of state that they think must be done. This would be discussed by the Soviet with as much contribution as possible. This gave power to the people themselves and allowed the people, a part of the commune, to decide what they want themselves and to ensure that the state machine acts in their interest for the benefit of the elected leaders and the people. Due to then the leaders needing to be empowered directly from the people if they desire to keep their jobs. Because with Soviet rule, there was a recalling of policies and representatives if the Soviet agreed and voted to do so. So to basically put this in perspective, if there were to be a politician that was not doing what they were elected to do and not being able to pass policies that the people elect as well, and make their own policies that would benefit the people, they can just be recalled. The people can just recall those politicians by their own vote through mass majority. This ensured the workers in Saigon that the workers' state would work together and be controlled by the workers themselves, for there would be a change of society to where the state can ultimately be abolished. This allowed more radical and beneficial changes that would put the people first in the workers' state, and not elected officials in their power, but even the elected officials being workers. A dictatorship of the proletariat is what the Saigon Commune was, with the workers' state, and there comes a change everywhere as well, including the economic formations. In the Saigon Commune, there was a massive transformation of economic policies that moved in the name a transformation, as in a fast-paced and fast-moving economic policy. that was supposed to last very short to when the revolution can't be permanent enough to where these transformational changes can then be negated with new core societal changes. That's one of the main functions of the worker state. It's the revolution itself, where the proletariat rises up against the bourgeoisie and subjects the bourgeoisie to the rule and domination of the proletariat. For the proletariat to act in their interests ultimately as a massive class, regardless of the opinions and the interests of the bourgeoisie, where the bourgeoisie is a very minor class. It's not socialist due to there being classes and money circulating in general, despite only circulating in workplaces, and thus had the function of the state. However, neither was it capitalist due to the fact that there wasn't a format to accumulate capital. This was done with the abolition of commodity production, the institution of utility production. There was the abolition of the market. As a result, then there was resulted in a planned economy to come about into the commune, as well as there was the abolition of private property in the Saigon Commune, and the formation of public property to be used for production of utilities. Then finally, there was only allowing money to circulate within workplaces themselves. None of this was an actual economic system. There were still halts and changes in those halts to need other countries to do the same so that it can last longer to create socialism out of capitalism. But either way, it had not come to state in capitalism, but neither was it socialist, due to still being money circulating and still class domination. Thus, in its actual formations, like every other worker state, it was an ongoing dismantling of capitalism for an ongoing establishment of socialism. It was a transformation that corresponded with the political transition, and that was the absolute rule of the working class to act in their own accords for a better society. But that better society wasn't there. To put it in a way as Marxist historian Simon Pirani would put it, quote, more than 150 popular committees were set up. This policy was actively fought for and by the Trotskyists of the ICL, and the first one, that being Ban Ko, on 19th of August. They took administrative power in many Saigon suburbs, starting with the Phu Nguyen on the 19th of August. A conference of the committees issued a program which insisted that the national bourgeoisie will be completely incapable of playing the role of the revolutionary vanguard, and the only popular alliance of the industrial workers and the rural toilers will be to free the nation from the domination of foreign capitalists. End quote. Simon Pirani, Vietnam and Trotskyism. The rule of the state and the rule of the given territory belonged and was made up by the workers themselves, and was functioned for there to be workers' power. In that power, for the first time, the world was theirs to play with. They had been given a chance to make something very new, and to make change that would not be held back any longer in a very fast pace, where now the movement of the proletariat was now up to them. The proletariat. The beauty of revolution was realized. However, it wasn't done spontaneously completely. This was able to happen through an effort to create the Vanguard Party. The thing is that this effort wouldn't be seized by the Viet Minh or the Indochinese Communist Party, such as the Communist Party of Vietnam. This would be seized by the people who were expelled by the Communist Party for disagreement against the Stalinist bureaucracy of the Communist International, and the revisionism that it played, as well as the disagreement of whether or not if there should be an effort to get involved within a workers' revolution among the workers themselves, or if there should be a resolution that is to concede to capitalist powers, that is made in result over the actual opinions and contributions of the proletariat of Vietnam. The former opinions that essentially seek to empower the proletariat was the contribution of Tai Thu Thao, Nguyen An Ninh, and the entire Trotskyist faction of the Indochinese Communist Party, after being expelled and created the International Communist League of Vietnam. That is referred to as the Struggle Group. The latter, which essentially seek to have power over the proletariat, and the opinion and degeneration of Ho Chi Minh was and the rest of the individuals that had been appointed into power by the Stalinist bureaucracy of the Communist International after Joseph Stalin took power and stamped down on democratic centralism within the Communist International, where Ho Chi Minh was able to benefit after swearing his agreement to and his loyalty to Joseph Stalin and his ideas, thus having the party degenerate in a matter of an instant due to the need to preserve the party's place in its formation that degenerate into bureaucracy within the Indochinese Communist Party. To provide more information, as Simon Pirani would say, quote, the ICP, as in the Indochinese Communist Party, led by Nguyen An Quoc, later be known as Ho Chi Minh, acted in the accordance of the ultra-left third period of the Stalinist policy, i.e. the decree from Moscow that struggles for power had to be launched without delay. As in, the peasant revolt declined under the hammer bowels of the French colonists. The Stalinists formed peasant soviets at the Naga An and Ha Tin, which they claimed to be the basis for the seizure of power. This adventuristic project was drowned in blood with the French crackdown. In total, 10,000 people were killed and 50,000 were deported to Poilo Condor and other concentration camps. A year of white terror ensued throughout 1932 as the leadership of the Stalinist and Trotskyist organizations alike were declamed. The Trotskyists likened in the Indochinese Communist Party's ultra-left policy that the Chinese Communist Party in 1927 Saigon Commune, during which they had made equally disastrous bid for power on Moscow's instructions. Their critique and their call for the ICP turns towards the Vietnam's economic working class movement instead of organizing exclusively among the peasantry and one as sympathetic adhering among the rank-and-file Stalinists. To add more context, the Saigon Commune was another workers' revolution that emerged in 1927 during the same period in which the Chinese Communist Party would declare war against the Kuomintang. That the workers themselves essentially made themselves a worker state. That the Stalinists and the Nationalists worked together into crushing it after the Saigon Commune refused to actually join among the Communist Party of China due to the popular front that they had made with the Kuomintang at the time. The Trotskyist political strength and their conditions of brutal colonial suppression gave rise to an existential relationship between Stalinism and Trotskyism in Vietnam during the 1930s. Simon Pirani, Vietnam and Trotskyism. This was where the biggest fight between Thai Tu Thao and the International Communist League would be against Ho Chi Minh and the Indochinese Communist Party. A debate and fight that would be performed by a proletarian revolutionary communist who spent lots of his youth and life fighting among the proletariat for the liberation and understanding Marxism and Leninism, to have a well-strategized revolutionary theory, in doing so to create a vanguard party against a son of a noble who has been educated and accepted a lot of the Trotskyist theory that states what Marx is saying for Marx, rather than actually reading Karl Marx for himself, as well as being lately taught into quote-unquote Marxism and quote-unquote Leninism by the teachings and ideas of Joseph Stalin, that instead of actually having the party act as an organization made up of the proletariat, the party would act as a revolutionary organization over the proletariat and lead them into revolution, rather than having the leadership among the proletariat. When the August Revolution of Saigon took place in 1945, where they rebelled against the French occupation and the Japanese invaders in Saigon, and declared a workers' state in Saigon, Tai Thao proposed an effort from the Chinese Communist Party to get involved with the workers' state and to be able and to be a central government made up of workers within the Communist Party. So that way, it can be more effective. It can be a more effective smash state machine that is already made from the proletariat. To Tai Thao, The Saigon Commune was a self-made and spontaneous revolution that came about that needed to have a form of organization to not allow the entire revolution to be purely spontaneous, to where the deorganization and demotivation and lack of planning and lack of needs supplies, counter-revolutionary practices, and decentralization resulting in the lack of connection from the state to the proletariat and other problems that came about during the spontaneous revolution, with spontaneous revolutions. Spontaneous revolutions to him as a Marxist and a Leninist, an actual Marxist and Leninist, that being a Trotskyist, was bound to fail and be betrayed. These lessons gathered from the first workers' state, the Paris Commune, and from the February Revolution of 1882 in Russia, and the Revolution of 1905 in Russia, the Shanghai Commune, the German Revolution, and Red Week in Netherlands. But this organization should not have revolutionary practices and revolutionary theory being made over the proletariat. Rather, the relationship between intellectuals and workers should be one-on-one, relationship and partnership, even with the intellectuals being workers themselves, where they sell their labor power to a bourgeois and get paid wages based on labor time they perform into the workday. The difference is that they are more class and politically conscious than other workers. As in, this worker is a communist and knows quite a lot on Marxist theory and knows the reasons and arguments of why capitalism is an inhumane, alienating, exploitive, and insufficient economic system. Not that he is over the worker, but that he is a fellow worker that seeks to educate others on their political and philosophical views. Talking with the proletariat and having them get to realize a lot of these problems, as well as provide outlets where the workers can read theory and use that theory to conduct on it and act on it in practice, thus creating a praxis. Thao was very much a person that saw the proletariat as the key of revolution. Hell, it's not even accurate to say he saw that they were the key of revolution. He saw that they were the revolution. They themselves, in their own social relations to the means of production, based on their own ability to produce commodities for society, the same ability to produce commodities that had been commodified itself when they had sold their ability to work, or more accurately, yet hard to comprehend, mental and physical ramifications for labor, where the proletariat is still able to perform labor because you cannot take away a person's labor itself, due to so requires the negations of laborers' limbs and mental comprehension completely. However, what you can do is buy the ability to work, to where they work, how long they work, and what they use, where they go, and how to do so, is determined by the buyer and the mental physical ramifications of work. This is your labor power. But the labor and the proletariat as the exploited labor force of capitalism still produces the very things that we use every day that keep society afloat. The construction workers are the ones that build the mansion, but don't get to live in it. The buyers of the mansion do, and probably the same bourgeois that bought their labor power of the construction workers to build the mansion. However, the construction workers are still the ones that built the mansion. The workers are the ones that did the calculation, discussion with the partners, and the ones that did the mapping, that gathered the tools and resources, that performed the labor to build the very thing the bourgeois lives in. Thus, the workers are also the ones that can do the calculation, the discussion with partners, the mapping, gathering for tools and resources, and the performance of the labor to tear it down. In other words, the emancipation of the proletariat had to come from the proletariat themselves. And this is what Thao essentially realized when he does mean that the workers were the revolution. They are the revolution. They are the ones that carry out the actions in their own army to fight against the bourgeoisie, so that way they can have an emancipated world. In a way where Karl Marx himself puts it, considering that the emancipation of the working class must be conquered by the working class themselves, that the struggle for emancipation of the working class means not a struggle for class privileges and monopolies, but for equal rights and duties, and the abolition of all class rule, that the emancipation, subjugation of the man of labor to the monopolizer of the means of labor, that is, the source of life, lies at the bottom of the servitude in all forms of all social misery, mental degradation, and political dependence. That the economical emancipation of the working class is therefore the great end to which every political movement ought to be subordinate as a means. That all efforts aiming to the great hitherto failed the want of solidarity between the manifold divisions of labor in each country, and from the absence of fraternal bond of union between the working class of difficult countries. That the emancipation of labor is neither a local nor a national, but a social problem, embracing all countries to which the modern society exists, and depending for its solution to a congress of practical and theoretical of the most advanced countries. That is the present revival of the working classes in the most industrious countries of Europe, while it raises a new hope and gives Solomon to the warning against the relapse into the old errors, and calls for immediate combination of the still disconnected movements. For these reasons, the International Working Men's Association has been founded. Karl Marx, General Rules, or mostly referred to as the General Rules of the International Working Men's Association. The liberation of the worker has to come from the worker himself. However, to effectively do this, we must talk to the worker about the problems of capitalism and why revolution and liberation is needed, or else everything will be worse for everyone down the road. This was opposed by Ho Chi Minh, taking a Kautsky's idea that Joseph Stalin revived, in thinking that the party has to guide the working class to revolution, and making the resolutions and actions for the workers, and the workers just having to agree with the minor action outside the party in mandatory agreement for a party line that says the intelligentsia of the party is smart and is the theoretical groundwork for revolution. The intelligentsia is a group of intellectuals that make resolutions and decisions in a party for the general membership entirely of said party, where the members of the party have to act in their in order, and failing to do so can result in expulsion and deranking in the party. None of this is connected to Karl Marx and his principles of revolution, and what that must do in midst of a people that is in discontent against capitalism. Not only in disconnection of Karl Marx's principles of a self-emancipation of the proletariat, but that of the principle that is able to influence other two greats of Marxism, being Frederick Engels and Vladimir Lenin. To Ho Chi Minh, the Indochinese Communist Party was primary, and the proletariat and the peasantry of Vietnam was secondary. As in, the proletariat and the peasantry had to side with the Indochinese Communist Party over imperialist, fascists, and threats of the workers and serfs, for trying to retain the state of affairs that had kept the proletariat and peasantry of Vietnam in state of oppression, domination, exploitation, monopolization, and alienation, usually being reasoned with the advances of the past battles and skirmishes. The Viet Minh, the standing army that came about from the Viet Minh. The Viet Minh was the standing army that came about from the Communist Party in fighting against imperialists. Thus, a lot of their own worldviews in relation to the people themselves was very minimal to none. Instead of being made from the workers and collectively organized to where they can elect their officers and or collectively organize plans and attacks and all militants apart from the militia, or where officers being elected would draw up plans and discussed by the militants to where a vote can be declared to it being acted on or not, with the connection of the people in the areas that the militias will be formed and stored by the vote and request of the people in given areas. Thus, Min saw himself as the person that represented what the people wanted, rather than actually having the people themselves decide what they want, by having a full cadre and equal cadres among the membership of the party with easy access to join to talk to the people. By doing this, over time, the proletariat wanted nothing to do with the Indochinese Communist Party, and they wanted to make their own revolution and establish a workers' state. So they did. let's go back to the Commune. What they were fighting against. Let's go back to the Commune and what they were fighting against. The Saigon Commune was established out of the fight against French occupiers of Saigon in the city and district areas of Saigon, and now known as Ho Chi Minh City today in Vietnam. In the mainland of South Vietnam, the French Imperialists have now been pushed back and have been fought against by workers and peasants in the country land areas. But now the most concentrated and most dense city, full of massive wealth, and now being in control and smashing the mode of production of capitalism within the city that stops the accumulation of capital and profit entirely. To the imperialists, the Saigon Commune was a detrimental threat to their system, rightfully so, because they had been called for the abolition of commodity production, the abolition of the market, and the stopping of circulation of money to the general population, and the abolition of private property, and acted on it. For the first time in Vietnamese history, the working class and the majority of the population were in power, and their decisions had been made of what would benefit the majority of society based on the vote and resolutions discussed and debated, then voted on what must be done. From the people to the state, then the state would have to act on the will of the people, for the people is what would give them power in the first place. This went for politics, but also economics and changing of the modes of production to stop any way to get profit and to stop the facilitation of capital, as well as even military affairs, where the standing army and police force had been abolished, and democracy was allowed in the justice system, where the people themselves can decide what to do, so they can stop the root cause of crime for each given case. All of this posed the major threat of the bureaucratic system of the state in France and the capitalist economic system that France was a part of, and the world had been subjected to. Where it benefited an elite class, now the masses posed a threat in encouraging economic transformation to take place and corresponded with a political transition that would then take place not just in Saigon, but all over the entire world. This same threat posed with Japan. Japan was increasingly growing its empire prior to the revolution of 1945 that established the Commune. The proletariat of Saigon was subject to the Japanese rule, where the fascist state of Japan used the same economic relations that France had, but then adopted a petty bourgeois class interest rather than a bourgeois class interest, which means to them that any effort to fight for protections of rights, racial equality, legal representation, and union organization protect their conditions and the rights of a worker employed was seen as undesirable, due to them having a petty bourgeois class in power. They did see some problems with the society we live in, but due to they themselves trying to get profit as well, just doing so by owning their own means of production. Thus, they blamed the proletariat for the problems, and did so by using a lot of racial and nationalist prejudice to justify it. Then as well blame communists for the degradation of society. Thus, instead of trying to negate classes, they just wanted to go back to previous social relations and previous economic activities. So when Japan, in the middle of fighting the Soviet Union, France, the United Kingdoms, and the United States, they swore to take back the land of Saigon and get rid of the degeneracy and unhonorable actions in the existence of the Saigon Commune. The Saigon Commune responded with a saying that they shall not be afraid of people who want to go back to a time where we coughed up blood. As well, we had already shown in the previous statements, as well as earlier, is that Ho Chi Minh and the Indochinese Communist Party, the Communist Party had been disconnected from the working class. Even when the working class has made actions to where they start the economic transformation and political transition from capitalism to communism, instead of acting as a vanguard party, they act as a sect party that faces problems against the proletariat. The same class basis the same class basis that's bring about socialism through the revolution of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie, from a class against another class as a class. The Trotskyists and the Indochinese Communist Party were able to realize this, and were able to make a coherent theory that aligned with this needed fact of how a socialist revolution was going to take place. When this was brought, they were bureaucratically expelled, and leaders, a part of the Trotskyist faction, were purged and expelled from the party, thus having to actually make a revolutionary proletarian party called the International Communist League, that became known as the struggle group, that would actually make the formations to start a party of the proletariat. Unfortunately, although the struggle group was for sure a vanguard party, they had only been around for a short period of time, and everything all happened at once. And they had just integrated Soviets in Saigon to the struggle group to allow more furthering of proletarian democracy and centralization to face on the international scale. The leadership had just started to on making their own works for the people to read and to be educated. So although all the actions of what makes a revolutionary proletarian party become a party of the proletariat was acted on, no one really had a planned out format of how democratic centralism will function, and how they can make the revolution permanent, and even what making the revolution permanent even meant. But for the time being, the proletariat had control of Saigon. The struggle group were made from the proletariat. There was a leap of economic transformations that actually changed the economic activities of the worker state, and just didn't put the working class in power of the capitalist economy. There was Soviet power, and there was direct say from the proletariat to the state, and how policy would be conducted. There was a proletarian militia made up from the people with direct connections to the justice system in a mass scale with democratic vote to trials and affairs. The Saigon Commune was in place, and it was strong. It had made life better. Products were more used. The happiness levels in the city had reached at the highest in its history. More freedom was allowed. There was more change that provided meaningful help, and there was a massive increase of education in the worker state. Their existence, however, was a threat and an insult to the rest of the world. And was a state that wasn't a state in a traditional sense, because they had smashed the state machine and actually made the state democratic, to where this revolutionary form of life would amass internationally, where the state can be negated entirely. Thus, there was an effort to crush it by any means necessary, and sometimes with lots of enemies, especially a lot of allies, or at the very least, common fighters in a common struggle for your enemy. An alliance was about to form, one that would shock even the Saigon Commune. Ho Chi Minh had already made up his mind, and that he and the entire Indochinese Communist Party represented the entire proletariat, supposedly. Thus, he thought that the proletariat would like any action that he would do, including actions that would see the death of a workers' revolution. With the Viet Minh fighting against the French armies for a long time, they had exercised their resources, fighters, and supplies to where they had been fighting them for quite a long time, even after the fascists of Japan had been pushed out of Vietnam. They had been facing a lot of infighting, and they had overextended their reach in battle, to where they thought it would be better to surrender to the French, where they could surrender yet be able to have their land, with some of compromise between the Viet Minh and France. France has been reestablished in its bourgeois state, and they had been trying to beat out their competitors and beat out their problems with their capital being held over by force from the proletarian population that generates profit, or a competitor able to buy more labor power and thus expand more production of commodities over them. Thus, France was interested in expanding more profits and getting more power from their enemies, from the capitalist system they had embraced since 1824. Thus, they did want to take all of Vietnam for themselves, but as long as they had more profit than the Axis powers at the time, which they were indeed amassing, they can be able to beat out their competitor and seize their industry in some way where a shared profit with aligned political beliefs and system can be instituted. That came with them wanting the one city that generated the most capital that allowed them to sell unique commodities better than their fellow bourgeois competitors and even allies. That city is Saigon. Here's the thing about the Viet Minh and the French state. They had been fighting the common enemy with the same tactics, the same formation of how operations were conducted, and they had a lot of the same enemies, both a part of the right wing, like Japan, and the left wing, like the struggle group. Thus, despite how different they claimed to be, they had some common interests, and they were very problematic for the Saigon Commune at the time. But at the time, when everyone was fighting each other, they hadn't realized that. For a chunk of time, the Viet Minh would still continue to fight the French forces in the north, as well as the French fought to try and recapture Saigon. The Saigon Commune had the city enclosing to all foreign aid, except the newly formed international left opposition, commonly referred to as the Fourth International, where the Saigon Commune vowed to fight the French capitalists and the Viet Minh substitutionists and the Japanese fascists if they need to, and have fought the French capitalists and the Japanese fascists. What the Saigon Commune wanted and fought for was the interests of the working class, for they were a state made up of the workers themselves in direct say to the state, that allowed an actual democracy to form from the people in a majority decision making by the opinions of the people, instead of a bureaucracy deciding what they want over the people. The proletariat's interests, and historically has been always, at the time of the Saigon Commune and before, was to stay out of being in a war, yet still make a threatening presence not by physical warfare with the bourgeoisie, but a fight of revolution, and rather if it would be able to spring up and spring up effectively, or if it will not spring up or be inefficient. It's making the revolution permanent until capitalism is defeated. Not to say that then the worker state literally declares war on the bourgeois states or on every neighbor state around. Rather, that the culture and the structures of the worker state is made to where it influences workers in other nations to rise up as well as seize control of the means of production, control private property, and change it to public, abolish commodity production, and abolish the market. All this halted any advancement for the bourgeois class to profit from the mode of production, or for profit extraction to take place, to where a bourgeoisie can be made in the first place, both a physical bourgeois class and an abstract bourgeois class. So, where the Indochinese Communist Party wanted to get out of their war with France, and France wanting as much capital accumulation as possible to come out from the war, Ho Chi Minh ordered for talks to come about between the Viet Minh and the French armies. There, Ho Chi Minh not only bureaucratically making decisions and not allowing opposition to come about in the party where democracy is needed to form a party of the proletariat, but now Ho Chi Minh has dealt into class collaborationism in a way that will result into the deaths of the proletariat to the benefit of the bourgeoisie, even proletarians in his own nation. There was an end to the conflict between the Viet Minh and the French armies, but talks of an official end and a lower decrease were being talked about between the two groups. Although the Stalinist-led Viet Minh conveniently welcomed the French General Grace's arrival in Hanoi, he quickly ejected their interim government. The Viet Minh urged population along its armed forces to disperse of the countryside and to reclaim as its de facto government, hopes to obtain negotiations. Negotiations were found in November of 1945. The Viet Minh and the French armies held a ceasefire and an agreement to not fight each other. There, the French were promised the south of Vietnam that would be divided on the 17th parallel. The French then agreed for the north of Vietnam, of the 17th parallel, to be fully independent to the rule of Ho Chi Minh and the Indochinese Communist Party. Being able to split up into many splinter states that will come about in Indochina. Indochina would not be fully unified, but rather be decentralized bourgeois states in the region, breaking up so far to where they would only have one major city generating the most capital, to where they are dependent to world trade with France, Britain, America, Japan, Russia, Germany, Italy, and Turkey, and the rest of the developed capitalist nations. These terms were discussed and were backed. This discussion would continue. At the same time, many Viet Minh and French armies no longer fought each other, and the French now were more focused in retaking south of Vietnam, and especially Saigon, after the declaration of the Saigon Commune. In a way, again, for historical context and excerpts, for this would actually come from Ngo Van Soye, a Vietnamese Trotskyist, a part of the struggle group that, at the time, and elected into the Central Committee of the Saigon Commune and struggle group, would say, quote, on the 14th of November, 1945, in China, South Vietnam, this same Viet Minh government arrested Popular Revolutionary Committee at 9th Rue de Quay, that had been set up to the initiative of the International Communist League. This embryonic Soviet had been placed onto the stamp upon the region of the Saigon Choyan, Ga Dinh, and Bin Huai, bombarded by the general staff of the General Gracie's British troops of occupation, as well as Stalinist Tran Van Gaiu clique who led the Viet Minh government. It had advanced as the slogans of arming the people and expropriating the landlords and handing over the land to the peasants, and for workers' occupation of factories. The Stalinist Minister of Interior, Nguyen Van Tao, sent soldiers to bring to their senses, within bursts of machine gun fire, the peasants of Go Dien, as well as the peasants of the Plain of Reeds, who had themselves expropriated the landlords. While as Ho Chi Minh and his follow were advertising themselves as supporters of the quote-unquote democratic Russo-Anglo-American imperialist allies against Japanese fascism. And whilst the Popular Revolutionary Committees were calling for the masses to armed insurrection against imperialists, democratic or fascist, Tran Van Gaiu sent his police, those same cops who only yesterday had still been in the service first of the French and then Japanese imperialism, to dissolve the committee and its militants, were sent to the central prison of Saigon to be shot. When the British troops, whom the Viet Minh government had but recently welcomed, and with a hooray to the Allied forces, helped the French reoccupy Saigon, Tran Van Gaiu and his gang fled to Cho Dem, leaving to the revolutionaries locked up in the hands of the French police and the British intelligence service, whilst the popular insurrection against the wishes of those who fought erupted against the Franco-British troops on the night of the 23rd of September. Ngo Van Soy, Moscow trial in Ho Chi Minh's guerrilla movement. On the 14th of November 1945, in Chunan, China, South Vietnam, the same Viet Minh government arrested the Popular Revolutionary Committees of the 9th Rue de Quay that had been set up on the initiative of the International Communist League. This embryonic Soviet had placed the stamp on the region of the Saigon Ga Dinh and Bin Huai, bombarded of the general staff of General Gracie's British troops of occupation, as well as the Stalinist Tran Van Gaiu clique who led the Viet Minh government, it had advanced the slogans of arming the people, expropriating the landlords, and handing over the lands to the peasants, and for workers' occupation of the factories. The Stalinist minister of the Interior, Ngoy Van Tao, sent soldiers to bring their senses. With a burst of machine guns, fire the peasants of Guadun, as well as the peasants of the Plain of Reeds, who had themselves expropriated the landlords. While as Ho Chi Minh and his follow were advertising themselves as supporters of the democratic Russo-Anglo-American imperialist allies against the Japanese fascism, and while as the popular revolutionary committees were calling the masses to armed insurrection against the imperialists, democratic or fascist, Tran Van Gogh sent his police, those same cops who only yesterday had still been in the service of the first French and then British imperialists, to dissolve the committee, and its militants were sent to the central prison in Saigon to be shot. When the British troops, whom the Viet Minh government had but recently welcomed with a hooray to the Allied forces, helped the French to reoccupy Saigon. Tran Vai Gao and his gang fled to Cho Dem, leaving the revolutionaries locked up in the hands of the French police and the British intelligence service. Whilst the popular insurrection against the wishes of those who fight to erupt against the Franco-British troops on the night of the 23rd of September. Ngo Van Soi, Moscow trial, and the Ho Chi Minh's guerrilla movement. In other words, the French struggle to take Saigon Commune in order to show that they are loyal to the discussion of treaties by the orders of Ho Chi Minh and the rest of the bureaucracy of the now Communist Party of Vietnam. They helped the French imperialists to crush workers and socialists outside the commune that showed sympathies with an actual revolution that came from the proletariat themselves through a vanguard and not a sect. Later, in the 25th of November 1945, France would officially discussed and requested that the Communist Party of Vietnam would not involve themselves nor have any relation to the Saigon Commune or the struggle group. France even went further and asked the Viet Minh that if they would help with the taking of Saigon if they requested. Ho Chi Minh replied in agreement with the request and replied, "Yes, I will crush any and all reactionaries that fail to meet the quotas of the people's government." Ho Chi Minh agreed to abandon the proletariat in Vietnam in a way where it can benefit capitalism and capitalist elites at this point. And all heard of this news, the Saigon Commune entirely started to understand how bad the situation has gotten, and has now been shown how far bureaucracy can take you and take actions that screw up everything to where it goes against the very need core principles. The workers of Saigon were shocked, and the struggle group were just the same. They knew that Minh was disconnected from the bureaucracy that he ruled with the bureaucratic organizational theories Joseph Stalin made, but they did not expect them to work in the same enemies that spent years saying to stand in full opposition as needed. But that just meant that another revolution has been betrayed. But not over yet. Thus, the proletarian militia rallied more fighters and armed them to the teeth, and prepared for a revolutionary war with the French. And that's where I'm going to probably leave off. We're already at a very high amount of minutes, and I honestly think talking more about this is going to extend this video already longer than it needs to be. We're already at 53 minutes, and I really don't want this video to basically be too long. So I'm going to leave this at a part. So I'm going to leave this at a part 1, and then engage in talking more about the Saigon Commune in another part, in which we can finally finish about the whole discussion about the Saigon Commune. But other than that, thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, then hit the like button down below. I'd very much appreciate it. If you're new to my channel, hit the subscribe button. I'd also very much appreciate it. Please entirely stay open-minded and stay militant against capitalism, as well as the fact be very verbal against against all forms of capitalist exploitation, both from the state and from a physical bourgeois class. And we need to understand about the Saigon Commune, and one of the biggest instances of, an actual worker state that had existed in Vietnam that was crushed by Stalinists, or specifically by imperialists and Stalinists. But basically, we're going to get more into that later on and get more into detail about that to know the full story of the Saigon Commune. I really hope you enjoy this video. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe, and I'd very much appreciate it if you get involved more into organizing all that stuff. Thank you for watching this video, and please be note of basically the Saigon Commune and the various struggles and the various stories about it today. If you want to see more of my videos, you can basically hit the videos on the right or left that would be provided, as well as my subscribe channel. And if you like the video, hit the like button. That's all I can really say. And please share this video so that way we can spread class and political consciousness and know about various histories of worker struggle and show the true power of the proletariat themselves in their own actions for emancipation. But other than that, thank you and have a good day.